Kia ora, everyone. I'm jumping in here in a very Aries-like fashion to share with you a collective reading of sorts for the ingress of Saturn into Aries as of right now, at the time of recording this. Um, yeah, so this will be a reading more or less for the collective and for right now as Saturn over here, if you see my mouse, hopefully, has just made its way into Aries at 0 degrees. I have created this chart from the perspective of this moment and from the location of Christchurch, New Zealand. Aries is the beginning of the zodiac, and this marks a 30-year cycle of Saturn returning to the very first point of the zodiacal calendar in Aries, which of course is the cardinal fire initiator, the warrior, the first uh, fronds blooming in spring. Another way to look at its symbol, by the way, other than just a pair of ram's horns. So, a concluding of a 30-year cycle of Saturn returning to the 0 degrees of the zodiac. Uh, Also, a conclusion of a 165-year cycle of Neptune returning to 0 degrees of the zodiac occurred a couple of weeks ago. Uh, and now, at this very moment, Saturn and Neptune meet at this exact point at the start of the zodiac. Now, the last time Saturn returned to this point in Aries, you know, we've seen various conflicts, and same with Neptune. I think it was the Civil War in America. However, the two of these meeting and coinciding at zero at the exact same point, as far as I can tell, it may have been as much as 4,500 years ago. So the Lord of Time and Karma, heaviness, lead, weight, discipline, and structure, Saturn, and Neptune, god of the seas, the collective unconscious, the oceans, music, love, spirituality, in some sense, a meeting at 0 degrees of Aries, bringing this kind of like mythological, structural, collective reset. And I say collective due to the fact that these are collective planets more so than some of the ones closer into Earth's orbit or the Sun. Um, yeah, and they take longer to move through the entire zodiacal calendar. So uh, no one alive has experienced Neptune in Aries, as far as I know, 165 years, let alone Neptune conjunct Saturn in Aries. You would have to find a very, very ancient ephemeris to track back the last time this happened. So, what might it mean? Aries, like I said, bold, initiating, starting new, warrior, yang or masculine, assertive, cardinal fire. If you think of the fire signs in three separate ways, Aries is when you light the fire and things are very exciting and you're blowing lots of air on it and it's rapidly changing and it's initiating, it's initiatory. So, one way of looking at this is we are being initiated, Aries, into Saturn, a new structure, Neptune, of spirit. There are many ways you can take these three archetypes meeting at this point in the zodiac and put them into new words. Beginning spiritual warfare, spiritual prison, those are pretty harsh terms. a nice way of putting it off the top of my head right at this moment. Very Aries. Uh, Fighting. Organizing a fight for collective consciousness or collective spirit. That's a nice way to put it. And yeah, okay, so collective themes, yes. And this will be hitting different people's charts differently. If you're a Aries rising, this will be most likely part of your first, maybe a little bit of your 12th house, and may come and show up in your life in the way you present yourself. If you've got a different rising sign, you know, it'll hit a place in your career life or your relational life. Yeah, I think, yeah, and with Saturn there, you know, we've got these contradictory forces where Aries is this cardinal fire, this initiatory beginning, an exciting flame. And you've got Saturn, which is coming there and demanding slowness and patience. It's like, yeah, it's like throwing lead into a fire that's starting, and it's going to burn very slowly and heat up a lot. Yeah, it's kind of like a pressure cooker for Saturn in some sense. I kind of see this potentially as a restructuring on collectively how we define spirit, how our collective structures and systems serve or do not serve spirit. You know, thinking of, you know, civil wars or revolutions with those kind of like spiritual things tied into place. You know, I think, yeah, a lot of what I've been seeing in this chart and how the astrology has been playing out in the world for the past maybe decade is that, like, you know, it's, I almost feel like we're always at a tipping point, but yeah, here the stars are clearly showing us that something big's going to happen, and it'll be equal parts good and equal parts bad, like all astrological aspects or happenings, you know. And the challenging stuff is actually there in turn to serve us as well. A couple of weeks ago, when Neptune hit 0 degrees here in Aries, we got the release of some terrible information about world news leaders and the behavior of these despicable human beings. Now Saturn, a couple of weeks later, has met that exact same point. And Neptune, you know, moving through Pisces, landing in Aries, and, you know, perhaps we'll be seeing end to collective delusions and illusions, and it's kind of like false spirituality that, you know, is flaunted by, you know, many of the systems that actually actively oppress us and use spirituality as a way to, you know, advocate for things that have nothing to do with spirit and actually actively work against it, you know. I think looking at the outer planets as well, the other outer planets, we have Pluto in Aquarius. Pluto is very, you know, long cycle around the zodiac. The agent of death, transformation, obsession. If we think of Saturn as man-made governmental kind of systems, I would think as Pluto as the hidden hand, you know, the kind of occult or deep state kind of forces. If we're looking at a collective reading for the entire world, you know, these are, yeah, when looking at like more mundane collective astrology, that's how I would kind of interpret Pluto. It's this agent of transformation containing within it the rejuvenating aspects of what you would think of as Scorpio kind of qualities of death, rebirth, that alchemical transformation of water into wine through fermentation, through that death process, that spirit emerges through this process. And in the more collective sense, you would also kind of think Pluto is that kind of hidden Hades kind of energy, or Persephone kind of energy. It lived in Capricorn for a long time, and a lot of our existence recently has had Pluto in Capricorn here. And it has, of course, made its way into Aquarius. And I feel like this is important in light of this collective reading. So Pluto, agent of transformation, death, rebirth into Aquarius. I feel like Aquarianness presides over technology, collective air, fixed air that moves slowly. The collective mind moves slowly, with the exception of sudden drastic changes. And I feel like Pluto moving into Aquarius recently, we've seen massive changes in how we communicate. The creation of digital technologies that change how we communicate, how we find information, how we source information. And and in the larger cycle, the light of the larger cycle, which is the precession of the equinoxes, we've all heard the song The Age of Aquarius, and we are very much so also leading into the age of Aquarius. It's debated whether we're in it exactly at this moment. And this is based off the precession of the equinoxes, so the sign that holds the sun on the equinox in the northern hemisphere. And this is a 26,500 year cycle. It's related to the Mayan calendar, and it's very long. Like I'll give an example here. In the age of Aries, this was kind of the time of Moses and the ram's horn and that kind of archetype. And then into the age of Pisces, we live in the age of the fish, Christ consciousness, and the fishermen, and now also this larger precession of the equinoxes has moved into Aquarius, and there is even evidence in the Bible that Christ, perhaps, or the archetype of Christ, knew this, saying that when my time is over, you will know, because a person will come carrying a pitcher of water, a vase of water, which is the sign for Aquarius. And yes, I believe like we're entering into this age, if not already in it, depending on who you listen to. And simultaneously, Pluto recently has made ingress into this. The way I would interpret this in a collective way, in a collective reading, would be that for each new eon, for each new age, mankind creates for themselves a new god, a new idol, a new deity. And this has been true throughout the ages. And Aquarius is presides over collective mind, technology, communication, revolution, a disruptor. It's obsessed with the future. And it's the only sign of the zodiac which is a human being, except for the twins and Gemini. So the way I would interpret this is that mankind wants to try to turn themselves into a god, and also that our new idol or our new religious iconography might be artificial intelligence during this age. However, with the ingress of Pluto into Aquarius recently, these technologies have the potential to transform, death, rebirth our entire culture, but also kind of bring up and bring to light and harbor our darkest, most hidden, most despicable parts of ourselves. And that's a good thing. That's Pluto's job. It's one of its roles in any chart. But it really is a collective audit of humanity through the technologies we create and how they reflect back to us where we're at, very honestly. However, there is the hidden hand element where like a lot of these technologies are not revolutionary because they are in fact held in power by those who actively suppress all of humanity and obsessed with the destruction of the planet, the degradation of spirit, and they're not leaders. We're led by the least among us, the least intelligent, the least noble, the least brave, as Terence McKenna would say. And yeah, they're the ones often at the helm of creating these new gods, as it were, for our collective society. But other aspects of Aquarius, I often think of the Thoth Tarot and the Star card, the like rejuvenating quality of Aquarius, this kind of like star-bound maiden who looks towards the future and just like can replenish all of life just by through that revolutionary kind of force. So there's that to look forward to. That like we may be, and those who seek power and seek domination may inadvertently bring to light enough to cause, this kind of like replenishing, revolutionary reawakening of the collective human story, I hope. Um, yeah. And speaking of Aquarius, ruler of Aquarius is Uranus, in one fashion. And Uranus is over here for us all in Taurus, very late degrees. So I think, and this is a picture of this guy right now in New Zealand, the first country in the world to see the light, and this ingress of Saturn into Aries. So we're going to feel this energy first, and it's going to wash over the entire planet over the next 24 hours and be steadily there for a wee while because these planets aren't moving fast. Taurus there in the first house of this chart, and Uranus, the disruptor, the kind of revolutionary kind of figure, the thing that like turns over the tables in the market or shakes the literal ground that we're on, is in Taurus. Resources, earth, money. I think if I was reading this chart and just guessing at what's in our future, I would say there's going to be massive revolution, Aquarius linked to Uranus, sudden revolution in how our resources are shared, how money is developed and sent and shared, and the literal earth underneath us may move in some sense as well. But this connection to these kind of Aquarian themes that are also happening kind of point that like maybe our resources will become more and more digital money, digital technologies. But thinking of Pluto hiding out in Aquarius as well, we may experience the kind of concerns around digital money, central bank digital currencies being this great innovation, but perhaps we may be falling into the hands of digital imprisonment through taking what should be physical, tangible Taurian resources, the transfer of energy between human beings, and creating that, sending all that to the digital realm, to the Aquarian realm, to the realm of mind, collective mind and abstraction. I don't think it's a good idea, and I hope it doesn't come to fruition. And if it does, I hope we quickly remedy it, because our monetary systems have lived in a realm of abstraction and continue to trend that way for too long. Our money isn't backed by anything. It's backed by compounds of debt and speculation and rehypothecation, which leads to the energy, the hypothetical abstracted energy of our resources outpacing the limits of the actual planet itself, and it means that like people can do imaginary work and garner fantastic, enormous, gross amounts of resource for doing bugger all, and the system can't exist much longer. Um, yeah, so I hope there's a big shake-up here. Um, it's interesting, we've got all this stuff going on in Aries. I've just looked at the chart now that, and the ruler of Aries, Mars, or something strongly associated with Aries, of course, uh, is also in Aquarius. So maybe there'll be a fight, maybe there'll be a confrontation at this moment of this Aquarian energy, especially because it's so close to the MC, the most visible public part of someone's chart. If this was a baby born today, I'd be like, wow, your Mars is really out there for everyone to see. So I would expect a lot of debate, a lot of public arguments, a lot of, especially in that ninth, 10th house kind of bridge at the MC there, where Mars is, and yeah, the Sun is there too. So our like the way, our kind of like vital consciousness or attention is also there as well. Speaking of attention, what is Mercury up to? It's in Pisces. Yeah, it's in those kind of collective waters, collective emotions, collective spirit realms. Yeah. I also noticed this kind of right here down the bottom here, we've got Jupiter in Cancer and we've got the moon in Capricorn. Okay, so we've got Jupiter, the planet of expansion, good fortune, optimism. It's the gravitational kind of savior of our solar system, sucking up all those asteroids that would otherwise make their way into the inner solar system. And it's the larger benefic. It's in Cancer, so there's this swelling, collective swelling and emergence and expansion of emotion and Cancerian themes, sensitivity, and the Cancerian themes of like everything in this world is a bit too hard right now. We got to close off. And I think I've been seeing that recently as well. The hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. Because Cancer is all those nourishing, emotionally sensitive, emotionally psychic, even qualities, but it is also that reclusive, self protecting, I'm too sensitive to handle all these qualities. And the planet of good fortune and expansion and luck, you know, um, Zeus himself is just sitting there being like, let's expand upon this, let's bring this out. And directly opposite in opposition is the moon, the said to be ruler of Cancer, where the moon is in one of her most happiest places. The emotions of the moon are all the way in the opposite sign in Capricorn. In that collective system kind of place, that collective resources kind of place of Capricorn, that collective earth, the way we share resources, the way we make systems around sharing resources, and things like government and, the patriarchy in some way. And yeah, I think we've been living in an age that has been ruled by the shadow aspects of Capricorn for a long time. We've been ruled by the shadow aspects of Capricorn, untempered by its opposite, Cancer. We've been living in a male dominant, material obsessed, and unintegrated Capricorn culture. There's nothing wrong with Capricorn at all, but any sign that isn't in checked and balanced by its polar opposite becomes just downright toxic and completely untrue and completely like based in illusion, because the two polar signs are always two halves of one truth. So I feel like an over Capricornian society leads to de facto Satanism. You think of the sign of Capricorn in the Thoth Tarot is the devil. And it's only the devil as we biblically kind of understand it in the negative kind of quality when it is unintegrated, unbalanced, and untempered by its opposite, Cancer. And at this moment, on this day, the moon, the ruler of Cancer, is hanging out in Capricorn. So we're feeling those feelings about how our collective systems do not serve us and serve something else. And Jupiter is there in Cancer, expanding on those feelings. So I say let's bring it all to light, you know? I'm going to stop it there. This is my first drop-in and my first collective reading. I've been doing about an astrology reading a week. I'm happy for you to DM me if that's something you would be interested in. And I can also recommend my friends Eva, Shikara, and one of my great mentors that got me into astrology, Erica Grant. I'll put all their details below. Thanks for listening. I hope it wasn't too heavy. Happy Valentine's Day. And happy Saturn in Aries.